What's up, guys? Today I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the hook test because there's been a lot of misconceptions on how to properly execute this, how to properly increase your hit rates on all the ads that you test, specifically strategies that we've been applying for brands like this to scale to up to 400 grand in active MRR, okay? So these are proven systems that we put in place here, and I want to share everything with you because I don't believe that people should be struggling with strategy. I think the execution is the hard part, and therefore I'm going to get right into it, okay? So these are just basically 3 examples if you've never heard of the hook test before, if you've never been around on this channel. Basically what this is just an image ad, 1 by 1, white background, text on it, and just text, okay? Text and text only. There's no primary text, no headline, no description. Call to action is learn more. And so the idea is you want to test 30, 50, maybe 100 of these to find ones that hit the KPIs. Usually it's, below $70 CPM and above 7% click-through rate. You spend like $2 only on each, right? And then you figure out exactly which ones are the best ones in order for you to be able to then put these best ones on the actual creatives. So just increase your hit rates, right? The most important part about every ad, the hook is just pre-validated and basically are able to just fill out your winning variable spreadsheet, which you hopefully already use in order to, obviously just massively increase all the hit rates in your account, okay? So that's what basically the summary of the hook test. Now, so I'm going to give you an example of how an ad account looks like if you actually do this properly, and I'm going to tell you what to do, and because this is the part that's actually confusing oftentimes when they don't meet the KPIs, or what you do when they do, right? Because a lot of people get super confused. Okay, well, I'm just test hooks, but when do I turn them off? How do I properly media buy? How do I actually know which ones to move on? It's super confusing, okay? So this is an ad account screenshot example of a actual hook test that we ran. And so as you can see here, we tested a bunch of them. Hook 51 is the highest one. You had more than these. So the idea is basically that it doesn't matter what media buying campaign setup you use, you just turn them off individually in the ad account, your media buyer or whatever, once they hit around $2 to $2.5 to $3 in spend individually. Obviously, you can't just you could set up a rule so that they automatically get turned off, but it's tricky to do that for, if you have multiple campaigns running. By the way, the hook test is generally something that you do again and again and again, even at scale. So not just a one-time thing, okay? So as you can see here, as I said before, we want to have hooks that are having at least a 7% click-through rate. So anything from here and up, right? So this one, which is hook 41, hook 21, hook 20, hook 42, hook 45. These are the actual ones that you would take in terms of CTR. Now, CPM in this case is all of these are good, right? But if one of these were above the limit, which happens, it does happen, and I want to break down exactly what you do then, but then you just wouldn't turn it on. Like you wouldn't move it on. There's things that you can do to iterate it, to get it down, to retest. However, this is something which I want to mention is if it doesn't hit the CPM criteria, right, you do not move it on. And you want to ideally have CPMs that are as low as possible, because obviously something that you have to keep in mind is the $70 might sound a little bit high still. And the answer is yes, it is, but it's obviously going to optimize further because the CPM is direct correlation into okay, how much are you able to retain people on the platform Facebook, right? And so if it's terrible, which is just text, right? So it's just text that you run, obviously you're not going to retain people for a very long time. And therefore it's usually pretty difficult to get very good low CPMs. But if you do manage to get those, you just move them on in the actual ads. Now, how to properly move them on, I have separate videos about those, but essentially to summarize, what you're going to do is you're going to, take a look at a couple different ways of what kind of concepts you even want to run or can run, and that's how you're going to implement it. For example, for someone that's just scaling something with ripped ads, I'd recommend to, copy and clone the voice of that winning UGC that you ripped, right? Make them say those words that you have on your winning hooks, cut it in the beginning and put a B-roll clip over it, or for example some other problem-based clip or anything, right? You could either put a normal normal AI UGC avatar in there and make her make it seem like it's that same person, or you could even implement it with being a different person. Again, aesthetics don't really matter. The only concept where aesthetics do matter is where it's classic UGC, but every other concept, this is going to work really well. That's one option. Another option which a lot of people do is they just put it on their winning piece of video ad that they already have as text, right? So they just put it on there, slap it on their text or in the primary text, and it will increase all the metrics. It will boost them all up, okay? So this is these are the most efficient ways. Now, a lot better, more in-depth ways, obviously, would be to start scripting ads based off of these hooks. So let's say you have a winning hook which says 4 reasons why, or 5 ways to, or here's why and here's how, and blah, blah, blah. All these examples variables, you have to obviously give the reasons then, right? And so that would be essentially you writing a proper script based off of that winning hook. And the whole topic of the ad starts with that hook, okay? That's one way. And then the other easier way obviously is image ads, because when you have image ads, you have your own hook anyways, right? You just have to make sure that the hook is not too long. And that's what I'm going to get into now. So usually there's 3 outcomes when you run a hook test, right? For every single hook, it either meets both criteria or just the CTR, right? Basically this example, or just the CPM, right? Obviously, both, like neither of the two, right? So that's the worst example. In that case, we just literally move on from everything, right? So if you have no hooks that even get like a CPM below $70 and get a CTR above 7%, you would just probably move on. It would be really tough and difficult for you to have to retest a good couple times until you turn that stuff profitable. So what do you do, right? So if everything hits the KPIs, most people get confused already, like, okay, what do I do now, right? So essentially you move it on, like I just said, into a creative test and integrate it into the ads that you already have, or you start scripting and graphic designing essentially your image ads or video ads based off of that hook, and you actually document it in a winning variables spreadsheet. And so winning variables spreadsheet is not a creative tracker. This is what a lot of people get confused. It's not like some pipeline system where you just put in your ads. It's actually just a super normal, very not that much in depth, just spreadsheet that you look at, and then you just put in all the single things that you have. So for example, let's say the length, let's say the keywords, let's say the avatar, let's say the angle, the awareness state, the sentence structure. Ideally, you want to have as much isolation in these variables as possible, because if you don't know what of these made it work, you have to enter all these in the same line, right? You know that, okay, this is the result, this is the metric, and then I'm going to break down every single one of these. But if you had tested, for example, the same hook with 2 different lengths or sentence structures or awareness stages, what would have happened is you would be able to tell, okay, this was the variable that made it work. And then you can have a separate entity in that variable spreadsheet when you know exactly what made it work. And the more isolation you have in your spreadsheet, the more you're at some point just able to throw together variables and just, print winning ads every single time, right? And you have to work your way up there. This doesn't just come overnight. That's the key point here. So this is what you do. Simple, cool, perfect. These actually do meet the criteria. Now, CPM is fine. CTR is below 7%. This is a very common example for kind of like beginners or overall people that kind of struggle to get good CTRs on their account. So this will be an example. Obviously, I will say this already, to pre-frame, this is the easier example because it always is easier to fix a click-through rate than to fix a CPM. Okay, just keep that in mind. So you're already good. Like you already basically are above, average, because most people do struggle with CPMs and never get out of that. Okay, so CTR is below 7%. What do we do, right? So these are some reasons why that is the case. First of all, they're completely different from your competitors. And obviously, you should run as many competitor-based ads as possible. That doesn't mean ripped ads, not the same thing at all. It's basically that you take inspiration in these variables that we've noted prior from competitors, because if you don't have your own winning variable spreadsheet, you have the access to the meta ads library, and you have access to every single Facebook ad that's ever being ran on the entire face of the earth. And so that's why you can just go ahead and build yourself an own competitor-based variables spreadsheet. Yeah. And so obviously, yes, it's not a guarantee that's also going to work in your avatar, pixel, audience pocket, whatever. However, you can massively improve your hit rates by just making everything that you do closer to what the competitors do. Second thing is, you didn't start with the relevant part of the hook. So this is a super specific thing you have to keep in mind. When you're writing a hook, let's say it's 2 sentences long, pretty long hook, right? What you would do is you would never ever start with the first sentence being something super boring, right? You have to make the first 3 or 5 words immediately optimize in the right audience. So you have to immediately talk about stuff that is completely reliant on, grabbing into their attention and optimizing the perfect audience. And then you realize, okay, I don't even need the second part oftentimes. And yes, if you don't need the second part, might as well get rid of it, right? Third thing is the avatar, right? Is right. Obviously, CPM is fine, but there's no resonance with the angle or desire. So you speak to the right person, but you don't speak to them in the proper way, or they're just not interested in the way that you speak to them. And so that's just a very simple thing. You just change the desire, change the problem, change the symptoms that you kind of target or talk about. And then number 4 is not enough people in that awareness stage. So that's a very, I would say, rare thing. But a lot of people, for example, and this is an important one, let's say you're targeting solution aware people for a, like a breath product, like a breath, like whatever, anti-choking device, right? So that is a pretty simple example because no one is solution aware of something like that. No one knows that exists. So you have to grab their attention by being unaware. You have to talk about the fear of having that problem in the first place. No one's going to watch that ad while they're choking themselves and already have Googled 10 solutions. No, it's not going to work like that. What actually works is they, know that they have the problem, right? They're scared. They're supposed to be scared after watching your ad. And then you talk about, okay, unaware, and then you kind of compare, and then you go into your solution. However, if you make a solution aware comparison hook against another choking device, no one's going to care because there's no one in that market, and therefore your CTR is super low. So just apply that to your niche and your market. And oftentimes you will find a lot of these similarities that what I talk about. So, and then the third example is the CTR is actually really good and fine, but the CPM is above $70. So once again, we have a big issue here, and this is the worst, I would say, obviously because this is the hardest to fix. So you're going to likely go from this problem to this problem when you fix it, and then only to this state, right? So you have the most to do, I would say, if you're in this stage, but it's not an issue because we're going to fix it. So there's 4 reasons why this could happen. First one is an avatar problem. Then we have a low page score, no warm up. Then it's too long. The hook itself is too long. And then the market is an issue, right? So too many competitors, okay? So how do we fix? Avatar problem is just a problem that when it comes to just speaking to the wrong person. And so, for example, if you do something, right, in a country or in a specific just overall market that everyone else is already trying to get, you don't niche down at all. You have the same gender, same age group, same interests as everyone else. Of course, you don't have a mechanism. You have nothing that sets you apart, makes you special. Of course, you're going to get punished by Facebook if there's 100 other people doing the same exact thing and also struggling with CPMs, okay? That's the stuff that you don't see on the ads library, but it exists always, okay? Second thing is a low page score or no warm-up. A lot of people, right, actually get super high CPMs when their page is terrible, right? So especially when you're very new and you upload a bunch of ads, and to be fair, we do upload a bunch of ads. As you can see, 50 hooks at once. If you upload them at once, might as well even like get your ad account like banned, but like obviously you should upload them step by step. So you just wait until each of them is out of review process. But even then, it's already something that triggers or flags, quote unquote, one of your assets, and usually it's the page, right? So the page score goes massively down because you don't warm it up properly. And so engagement campaigns help, right? Everything that gets you a bunch of comments, shares, likes before you increase the amount of hooks that you upload. Super powerful. Number 3 is that the hook itself is too long. This is kind of tied to what I was saying before, essentially when oftentimes you realize is, okay, like my hook itself, if I start with the relevant part, oftentimes the second part of it, I don't even need anymore. And so get rid of it because the longer your hook is, the less it will actually optimize in the correct audience. This is something which we found. And so therefore, might as well get rid of it and you will see better CPMs. Even if your CPMs are in range, let's say they're $60 and you want to get them down to 30. Also do this, not only if this issue occurs, okay? And then the fourth step, right, is the market issue, right? So too many competitors. This is something which I've put last because this is something which you don't want to blame. You generally want to blame yourself, but these are things that you still can control. And so therefore, running stuff up in another market, and so just maybe, for example, if that means moving away from the US to Australia, UK, Canada, New Zealand, whatever, or even some EU markets, even the Middle East sometimes actually does work properly because there's just simply a lot less people, sometimes 0 people trying to do the same thing, and therefore you get good CPMs again, right? And overall, by the way, in the US, you'll have the highest CPMs anyways, right? It doesn't matter if you're good or not. So that was pretty much it for this video, guys. I want to say thank you so much for giving me your most important asset, which is your attention. See you next time. I wish you a beautiful day.